Tonight on Community Connections, we'll be talking about social media and its impact on you. Welcome to Community Connections. I have with me Don Swanson, who is Professor of Communications, and Lisa Kanda from Elkay Communications, a private company. And we're talking today about social media, which is a relatively new phrase. Lisa, could you tell me what that is?
In the simplest terms, social media is the use of technology combined with social interactions to create value. I mean, you can expand on that as what does value mean, and it's really defined by the user.
Okay. So social media means what? It's not just the internet. It's more specific than that.
It's using different technology to create social interactions. So it could be your cell phone and text messaging. The internet translates into your cell phone now. So it's using all those types of communication.
So Facebook, which is very common, MySpace, which I think has faded somewhat from the scene, Twitter, these are all forms of doing it?
Yes.
I mean, the one that I really don't, Facebook, I know what it is. I don't go on it, at least not yet, but I know what it is. What's Twitter?
Twitter is what's called microblogging. So it's communicating with people in 140 characters or less. Similar to maybe the instant messaging you may be familiar with, or the chat. That's what Twitter does. You have to be very short in your communication, and it's broadcast throughout what we call the Twitter world. I mean, anyone and everyone can see what you're saying.
Where do you get it? I know that I follow sports a lot. And one of the great controversies in sports are, at halftime, athletes are Twittering, you know, and what is it? It goes online, it goes onto a web page, and people go read it there, or it goes right to their cell phones, or?
All the above. Twitter.com. So it has its own website, and that's the domain for Twitter. But yes, you can get it on your cell phone. You can download, if people are familiar with applications, I know iPhone talks about it, but all of your...
I could pull my iPhone out right now.
All of them have apps, and there's an app for Twitter that you can download to your cell phone. So you can use it on your cell phone, you can use it on your computer, and what you do so that you can follow what's going on in the sports world is you follow people. So you can search the Twitter world and see if any, in fact, I follow Reggie Bush. I'm a Saints fan. Don't kill me, they're playing the Giants coming up. So, but if I want to follow a particular sports fan, I'll look and see if they're on the Twitter world, and I'll follow them. So whenever they say something, it will come up in my feed, similar to like Facebook, so you'll be able to see what they're saying. So you can only look at what people are putting out there if you follow them.
You're not getting their pictures, you're not getting their video. It's a miniaturized version, so to speak, of Facebook.
Yes, it's a quick message. You can send pictures and video, but it's in a link format. So an example would be I was at the block party here for Long Branch, and we had a pie eating contest. And with my cell phone, I took pictures of the contest.
Now you know why I didn't enter.
And I was able to take those pictures with my cell phone and post them on Twitter.
So somebody could go, they'd see that you mentioned them, and you'd have the link right there.
And there would be a short link there, and then they would go see it. And believe it or not, we had great response to that. A lot of people went and looked at the pictures.
Well, that just gives an example of value added to it, because now you're able to advertise and promote an event.
Correct.
And you use Twitter to do it.
And it's on real time. So
what do you mean real time?
Well, as it's happening, I'm putting it out there. So
as long as someone will take the time, and I'm making actually with mine, it's more like this.
So in real time, just as we had them eating the pie, I took the picture, put it right up there. When the winner was announced, I took his picture and put it right out there.
So within less than a minute, somebody could see what was going on.
Yeah.
Don, and you look at the Iran controversy. I mean, Twitter was huge during that because you got real-time information, and that's, I think, what brought Twitter into the more common language, and people saying, what the heck is this? Because of that.
Soldiers were able to do it and post, and people
just normal people, you know, people, you know, the people who were protesting against the election.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Don, you've been teaching here at Monmouth for a while. Is this brand new to you guys? I mean, did you see this coming?
Well, yeah, we saw it coming, but it's still brand new to us, and wrapping our arms around how some of these social media tools should be appropriately used in things like public relations that we teach, in journalism. We have completely revamped our journalism approach because, you know, today's world, so many people read newspapers online, get their information instantly, as Lisa just indicated. There are a number of ramifications in communication. The one that's really kind of intriguing too is those of us who study organizational communication look at what sort of strategies do people use to either allow, encourage, use operationally some of these tools in the business or for the business. And Lisa can talk about especially that in the realm of marketing, as you just mentioned. But another interesting implication is there's a lot of research being done now on what is this doing to interpersonal communication between people. How is it changing relationship communication? And, you know, there are people who see positive things, there are people who see negative things. And what's it doing to simply the way we talk to each other and listen to each other?
What do you think it is doing? What would your reaction be to that?
I don't know. It's a little bit early to tell.
Okay.
I do some training programs on communication between millennials and boomers, or people in that realm.
Boomers would be approximately my age or a little bit older.
Yeah.
Millenniums would be kids who are now in college.
Sure. For example, I've done some workshops at Fort Monmouth with new employees coming in who are going to be then working for boomer bosses who've worked for the Department of the Army for 20 years. Well, that's going to be quite a change and a whole lot of expectations about how leadership functions, how motivation functions, how people communicate back and forth, how you manage conflict, what you say and don't say and do. But then another element is, of course, what, you know, these people, these young millennials come in, they're accustomed to communicating with these social tools. They're accustomed to using those freely. What happens? You know, so there's a huge challenge today. And really what we're talking about with millennials, for example, is that we're talking about digital natives. There's a best-selling book out entitled that, which means, like my grandchildren, they've grown up with that always there.
So you're answering my question, what's a digital native?
Yeah, they don't know what it's like not to have it. So that's really quite different than those of us in later generations.
Like me.
Yeah.
They've always had the internet. They don't know a life without it.
Yeah, can you imagine that?
Always well, yeah, you know what? Let me ask you this then. I grew up in an era where we always had TV. It was relatively new when I was 4 or 5 years old, but I can't remember a day without a television set in the house. There was one. It was black and white. My father and mother remember a day without TV and when there was a radio. Is it that different, or is this just a natural progress and transformation to, you know, that we're always going to go through?
I think we're always going to go through various transformations. Lisa can talk to this, I think, but wouldn't you say, Lisa, that the developments we're seeing now are really incredible moves forward in technological capability, but also in software?
Yes.
And that there are a lot of very smart people who are very imaginative about how these things would work. Because for someone from my generation, the first time I heard how Twitter worked, I thought, who would use that? How could that possibly,
I think it's
how could you possibly find that appealing, you see?
I haven't figured out how it is appealing, but that's me. But millions of people are. Yeah. I mean, it's not a day that doesn't go by that you don't see a reference to it. And I don't know, how long has it been around? A year or two, if that?
No, longer than that.
Oh, longer
than that. I would say about 5 years maybe.
Twitter? Goes to show what I know.
Yeah, it's just really developed into more users. Twitter has about 50 million users right now, so it's still the stepchild of Facebook, which is about 300 million right now.
You had made a comment, if Facebook was a country, it would be?
It would be about the 4th largest country.
that many people are on it.
Yes. And 100 million, so 1 in 3 are on Facebook every day.
Well, you had made how people are communicating with one another. I don't have a Facebook page. A friend of my wife's describes it as the world's largest cocktail party. There's always somebody there. How do you see it today, altering the way people communicate with one another? I mean, because to me it seems very non-private. You're communicating with a lot of people at once. I'm not sure that that's how I want to communicate with people, although as an elected official, that's pretty tempting.
Right. That actually lends into a conversation Don were having earlier about privacy. One thing people don't realize is that you can set your privacy settings, especially in Facebook. And I find that's very important so that you can limit who sees what. So you can have many friends, but you can limit the access to information. So you can still interact and have social conversation with the people you want to and have people see things, but have privacy settings in place so that you are protected, especially for younger children. That's important.
I was going to, one of the concerns that I think every parent has, and whenever there's an incident that involves the internet, and there are a lot, huge concerns. What do children see, and maybe more importantly, who's communicating with your kids? How is that protected, and how big a threat is it really?
I think if parents don't know how to set the privacy settings, they could be very vulnerable. And that's probably one of the reasons I'm a big advocate. I place free videos on my website for people to learn how to do these things because I think it's so critical that they take the time to learn. I think when the MySpace was very, very popular and all the kids were on MySpace and parents were signing up for it and trying to find out what was going on. Same thing with Facebook. You need to understand the tool, understand what it can do, and monitor it just like anything else.
And a really important thing about this, I think, is also for people to realize that materials that you put on there are archivable.
Use that word again.
Archivable, which means savable.
Okay.
It's just like we've all heard stories about, and I've seen a lot of situations going back 10 years or so in organizations where people so I'm angry at you, so I send you a nasty email. You save that email and you show it to other people or send it to other people, or maybe you use it in an action against me. I'm sure as a lawyer you've come across those kinds of things. It's the same thing with Facebook. I mean, I'm an active member of a human resource management group, and we've had people talk to us who are who work advising major recruiting efforts in large corporate entities. They consistently, if someone's searching for a job, they go and look on their social media sites, see what they can access, see what they can find out about those.
So some 19-year-old kid who puts a picture of himself online doing something that could prove to be embarrassing when he's a 23-year-old adult, better be careful.
Yeah, that's right.
Always.
And so if I put something on that Facebook and I take it down later, somebody can still find it if it was there once? Is that the way it works?
I couldn't answer that directly, but potentially, depending on how it got archived. Sometimes even websites now, you think you took a page down, but somehow it's hidden back there and you didn't know there. I mean, hackers are pretty creative, so there's some very sophisticated tools out there. I would say always err on the side of don't put anything ever out there that you would never want to be seen. Yeah. And that digital footprint is out there in every format of social media. Whether it's a Twitter, an instant message, a text message, they're all archivable now and can be used.
I mean, somebody, now I use text messaging a lot. I have found, all kidding aside, it is the best way to communicate with a teenager.
Yes.
If I were to text now from this show, before the show was over, I know I'd get a response. I call, I leave a message, but somebody can always go find those.
That's right.
Yes.
So you've got to be a little bit more careful, and certainly with things online. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back for the second half of the show.
Why do I call it a funny bone?
Why can't penguins fly?
Like to see something. Can we go to the moon on vacation?
If you think it's tough answering these questions, imagine the ones you'll get if your child is diagnosed with cancer. CureSearch.org can help. It's run by doctors and scientists whose research has led to an overall cure rate of 78%. You're not as alone as you feel.
You're looking at the #1 cause of lung cancer, That's why the Surgeon General issued this warning. Now you're looking at the #1 cause of lung cancer for non-smokers. That's why the Surgeon General issued this warning. Radon is an invisible radioactive gas that seeps inside your home from underground. Whether you smoke or not, radon can cause lung cancer. Protect your family. Have your home tested. Call 1-800-SOS-RADON. Radon problems can be fixed.
We're back with the second half of the show talking about social media. There are more applications, I'm sure, than I can possibly imagine. I don't know that much about it. But, you know, you're in the business marketing. How does it apply to your business?
It's amazing what social media has done for business, for those that want to embrace it and learn how to use it properly. Because just as in any marketing tool, there's certain etiquette that you should follow. It's not about selling. It's about creating relationships. We talked earlier about Facebook being like a cocktail party. Social media is like a cocktail party. You walk into the room and you meet everybody and you create relationships with them and you share things with them. And then down the road, when they learn to trust you and you've built your credibility and your reputation, that's when they come to you and say, oh, this is what you do. Maybe we should talk a little bit more about that. And then the business comes.
So it's not really a substitute for the networking. It's just a different way to do it.
Correct.
That's a good way to put
Correct,
it, because
yes.
we know through communication research for decades that the way things happen is through relationships with people. That's the best way to sell. It's the best way to find another position if you're looking for a job. It's probably the most satisfying, important thing in our everyday lives are our relationships with others. And this, you know, many people say this really enhances those relationships. They're in touch more. For example, our students at Monmouth University, there are many of them who will say, I'm in touch with my mom or my dad several times a day. But they're talking about on Facebook or on, you know, our text messaging, which, you know, would be unheard of a few years ago.
I mean, when I was in college, you still wrote letters.
Yeah.
Now, email's old-fashioned.
Yeah.
Definitely with the younger generation, text messaging is the main way of communicating.
But it changes things. For example, I was telling you before, my daughter's a freshman in college. I don't think I've sent her a single email, let alone a written letter. But we text each other frequently. And if I text a teenager, I know I'm getting a response quickly, hopefully unless they're in class or asleep. But they do. But it makes the communication very different. It's concise. You know, OMG means oh my God, or LOL means, you know, I mean, it has changed it. How does that affect the business world? It can't be that much different. I mean, Twitter is, how much can you say in 140 characters?
Well, you have to learn to be much more concise, that's for sure. And you have to be more strategic in the way you present yourself. So one of the parts of the business that I do and when I work with clients and individuals and companies is you have to talk about strategy first. Before you can communicate, what do you want to put out there? And then when you decide how you want to communicate and what your strategy is, then it becomes much easier. You know, in a social context of a communication with a parent to child or friend to friend, you know, it's a little bit different, and I'm sure Don can give you more examples of that. In the business world, you know, I work with my clients to say, what do you want to communicate, and make sure you're adding that value, because that's what people are looking for.
Give me an example. What type of clients do you have that are looking
Everything,
to get into
professional services, you know, attorneys, accountants. Also, nonprofit organizations are now embracing social media, especially from a fundraising standpoint, because many of their donors are in that area. Corporations, I mean, you know, large corporations are huge into social media. Comcast is a great example on Twitter. If you know, there's many horror stories about working with the cable company and trying to get the cable company to answer your call. If you're on Twitter, and I've had this experience personally, and you have a problem with Comcast, you Twitter it, and you get an immediate response.
Really?
They have a thing out there called Comcast Cares, and they monitor anything that's said out there about Comcast at any time in the Twitter world. And there's one person dedicated to responding to that. And I've had it happen.
So if I'm on Twitter and my cable box breaks and I Twitter them as opposed to emailing, texting, or calling.
Yes, you'll get a faster response.
Okay.
Southwest Airlines, known for how they do their business and very customer-centric. They were looking at changing their policy on how people board the plane because you don't get assigned seats. There was an outrage from their community through Twitter that they didn't want them to change it, so they backed off that policy.
Think of that as market research. Get an instant response from people. If they said that, if we change this policy, how will you react?
Yeah, and immediately they changed their mind.
I don't know if you'd know this, but what percentage of people who go on Twitter do it through their phones?
That I wouldn't know. It's not just through their phone. One of the things also with my business where I help people manage this, because it can be unmanageable or just scary because you don't know enough about it. So you want to work with someone who has used these tools and can guide you in the right way. So there are a lot of tools out there on your computer and on your phone to make it manageable. So you may not be online on twitter.com, but there are other applications that can be on your desktop while you're on your computer that you can access in order to be on Twitter and Facebook and interact in the same way.
Because I know one of the phone has given an immediacy to, if an action occurs, you know it will be online. And even if you're not the sort of, I'm not technologically adept, but I go online. And if somebody does something, if a celebrity does something embarrassing in a public place, there are going to be 15 people holding their phones up, taping them, and before that poor person gets home, it's online, even if you're not a celebrity.
Yes. Right.
That's changed the way we've communicated. And I mean, the ability of someone to have, be it a Twitter page or a Facebook page, devoted, you can set up, in effect, your own newspaper without ever having to print a single page. How's that changed communication?
Well, it's changed. Lisa and I were talking about this before. It's also changed in a sense that today you will see, in mainstream news shows, you will see that people have sent something shown on a telephone. For example, when the U.S. airliner crashed in the Hudson, they immediately had pictures of that. One from a security camera, but also from people. The best ones were people who had their camera phones up and took pictures of it. And so media outlets love this now because people are willing to share the things that they have. But it's part of this instantaneous communication cycle. The other thing is that politicians have discovered that they're always on 24/7. Whatever they're doing, it's observable. That's true for business executives, government officials, all sorts of people, which may be good or bad. That's one of those things that some people would say is a downside,
I'll ask you,
loss of privacy.
You're a professor. You were his student, good or bad? I'm the politician. We watched a presidential campaign a little less than a year ago right now, where the Obama campaign mastered the use of the internet for fundraising, for communication, and a year later they're still going. They're still going very strong. If you're an athlete who wants to go out, a celebrity who wants to go out for a relaxing night, you're getting taped. Is that a good thing? The loss of privacy comes with benefits, though.
It does.
Yeah.
I think celebrities know that that's a part of the picture,
Yeah,
though.
they know today, and they're coached, and people are advised on how to.
Guys like you coach them.
Yes. There's a downside, though, if I want to put a negative in here, and that is that we're beginning to have in our culture the information haves and the information have-nots. There's still a sizable number of families in this country that don't have a computer in their home. Probably at least 20–30% of homes. These are the people who cannot afford to have some of the electronic devices, and so they're left out of this information revolution. And there are now theorists beginning to try to figure out, what does that mean? Does that even further divide our fragmented society, fragmented with the people, the elites at the top? Just like, the Obama campaign was criticized by some of its opponents as being very elitist because all of these really information savvy people were driving the fundraising and driving the immediate response information sharing. And that a lot of other people, particularly from older generations, weren't savvy about that. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's a very valid point that you do have that division, but I think it's just going to take time for things to catch up. like everything else. I mean, you look back, people didn't have TV sets. It just took, it takes a little bit longer to bring that up.
And if we take an international perspective, this is an area we're not at all ahead in.
Correct.
Europeans
Extremely,
are far
yes.
ahead of us in some of this technology.
What are they doing that's advanced of us?
Well, they had advanced cell phone service long before we did, a much deeper penetration. I mean, in other words,
Of
a
the
much
market?
larger
Yes.
percentage of people have them. It's, and I'm not sure all the reasons, but that's just a fact of life.
I don't know if you know. You mentioned that after the election in Iran, where they had massive protests, one of the ways that the rest of the world found out about it was the protesters had cell phones and were able to communicate outside of the country. That makes a different argument. Maybe it is a path to democracy, because now you've got the ability to communicate. Anybody has the ability to communicate from anywhere at any time.
Sure.
That changes things.
I mean, we would argue probably, I say we, looking at communication history from the middle of the 20th century, that a lot of the political changes we've seen in the world, collapse of communism and a lot of things,
Watergate?
probably due to advanced communication technology, and no longer can a country really shut off all of this communication.
But I'll throw out a different idea. I don't think we're going to have enough time. I said Watergate. Watergate was the political scandal that brought down a president, because two beat reporters who weren't even that high up on the chain of command did tremendous research.
Yeah.
And they dug and they dug and they dug. Will that ever happen again?
Well, that's...
Do those guys even have jobs anymore?
See, that's the other side of that coin of this quick, very concise, brief communication. Who's in newspapers laying off their investigative reporters, and news broadcasts being quick and brief, and so they don't have time for investigative reports.
How about
That
an
makes
issue
it
that
tough.
requires real thought and real in-depth analysis? I can't consolidate property taxes in New Jersey into 140 words or less.
But there's other ways of using social media, such as blogging. And that's very important, because blogging is a bigger technique of content sharing and publishing information. And it allows it for a much larger, broader audience. So you don't have to be a newspaper reporter anymore. You're a reporter by yourself, and you decide to report.
But does that person really do the digging? Does that person get into the depths of an issue? Will they take the time to go read the documents?
Possibly or not.
Possibly.
But what blogging allows, and this is where that social media interaction comes in, is that you can comment. Blogging allows people to comment and refute. And so if they find inaccuracies in what you're saying, they're going to put it out there. And they're going to say what you wrote was incorrect. And they'll substantiate that with what they think. So yes, it may or may not do the research, but other people will. And that's where the social aspect comes from.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for hosting us here at Monmouth University at the studio. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Been very interesting.
That was interesting.